Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. It is nice outside, but this is going to be a quick 1 hour helping us understand how to change no to yes, how to get our parents to accept help when they need it and say they don't want it. So welcome to our next installment in the award-winning Conversations webinars. This one is about how to cope with an adult who needs help but refuses it. We'll have two strong speakers on this topic. I am Richard Bressler, board chair of the Weinstein Hospice Board of Advisors, having served as marketing chair since 2012 and a current member of the Jewish HomeLife Board of Directors. I'm a career marketer and community volunteer for the Weinstein Hospice, having graduated from Tulane and Northwestern universities. Weinstein Hospice is the palliative and end-of-life component of Jewish HomeLife, an organization centered on aging, which provides care for a new age. As the only Jewish not-for-profit hospice in Georgia, we tackle issues of community concern in a series of conversations. We've completed the production of 11 successful Zoom webinars for Weinstein Hospice, all targeted at generating awareness and promoting a conversation among the 45 to 60-year-old population in northern metro Atlanta. The conversations are all available for viewing on the Weinstein Hospice website under Education and Resources. This one will also reside there after completion. After this one, we will have 4 more conversations planned for November through May of next year. I will now introduce both speakers, and then we will start with Jennifer. She will show you the array of services available to you and your parent. Through AgeWell, she will help you navigate access to what you need. A sort of one call is all you need phone number. After Jennifer, Jessica will speak about what geriatric support could look like for stubborn parents. So Jennifer Curry is an MPH, and she's the manager for AgeWell Atlanta, innovative collaboration between Jewish HomeLife, Jewish Family and Career Services, the Marcus Jewish Community Center, and the Jewish Federation of Greater Atlanta. Jennifer has served in this role for almost 5 years, ever since the official launch of AgeWell Atlanta in 2019. Jennifer is a subject matter expert in aging services who has worked in the Atlanta area for 2 decades. Jennifer holds a master's degree in public health from Emory University and a certificate in aging from Boston University. Jennifer is a certified information and referral specialist in aging and a former board member of the Georgia Gerontology Society. Her full details are on this slide. Jessica Wilson received her BA from the University of Michigan and MSW with a specialty in aging from Hunter College in New York, and has worked in the field of aging for over 20 years. She is most passionate about serving older adults in community settings and has worked at area agencies on aging. As a geriatric care manager at JF&CS, she conducts assessments, creates care plans, counsels families, and facilitates monthly caregiver support groups. She is a fierce advocate for making sure their needs are met and ensuring their voices are heard. We will start with Jennifer and be back to Jessica in a few minutes. Please put your questions in the chat box and/or the Q&A box, and we should be able to get to all of them after they've both had a chance to speak.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you so much. And thank you to all of our audience members for taking time out on this beautiful evening for this important topic. As Richard mentioned, I'm the manager of AgeWell Atlanta, which is a collaboration. And I wanted to just talk for just a quick second about how AgeWell even started and what that model is. So Richard kind of nailed it when he said it's one call. So if you are a member of the Jewish community, and if you're not, we serve everyone, you may pick up the phone during a crisis with your parent and call JF&CS because that's who you have a relationship with. Or maybe your mom had a great experience after she fell and she was in a short-term rehab over at the William Bremen Jewish Home. So it's very natural to pick up the phone and call who you know. But we really want to get people calling the 1-866 AgeWell number because we represent all 4 agencies. And our goal is to make it easier for you in times of stress and crisis to help your loved ones, because no one can keep track of what programs exist and which agency has which. So this is kind of the general national model of AgeWell, is this one-stop shop. We are modeled after AgeWell in Pittsburgh, but other Jewish community kind of sister agencies in Cincinnati and Baltimore and St. Louis. So it's really catching on as we find out how valuable it is to people like yourselves. So how does it work? There's a me. And I know Richard wasn't sure because a lot of people don't know this term, but INR, information and referral, that's what you're going to hear me say. That is in our case for AgeWell, that is in-depth telephone conversation where I like to say we meet you where you are. So no one's aging journey is the same. No one's caregiver journey is the same. So if you give us a call, our concierges will spend time, sometimes multiple calls with you, understanding the situation, and then offering a signature AgeWell service, which we call warm handoff. A lot of people who call us are in-laws. I find that very interesting. And it's not always the daughter-in-law, but it's usually the daughter-in-law. And she'll call and we'll give all this great information. And she'll say, I'm just trying to help out. Everybody's stressed out. I just wanted to do my part. I'm just collecting information. And that's fantastic. So what we do is we follow up with an email and we send the daughter-in-law or whoever calls us that information for her to share with and discuss with the family. But if it is what we call the care recipient or who is calling us, or let's say it's someone trying to get transportation for her husband, for example, we're going to offer that warm handoff. So let me tell you what the opposite of a warm handoff is. I know I can't see you raising your hands, but how many of us have called and been on hold forever, especially when it's like a time where your time is really valuable and you get through to someone, and even though you pressed all the right buttons on that phone tree, press 1 if you need this, you go through your whole story and they say, oh, that's not my department. I've got to move you along. So part of our goal is to avoid all of that by saying, you know what, if you want to give me the story, you shared your story with me about your dad, with your permission, I'd like to make a warm handoff to Extine Home Care, give them the background and have them call you. And we find that for the most part, people that we offer this to really, really love it. We can also follow up. So if that daughter-in-law calls us and she's like, I'm just collecting information, we can mark that for follow-up just to be helpful and call her and say, did you get the information we emailed? Did you get a chance to share it with your family? Is there any way that we can be helpful? So you might hear in the medical setting a continuum of services. I just learned this phrase recently from my colleagues, and I've adopted it: universe of programs and services. I mentioned that no one's aging journey is the same, but what I like to show is that within our AgeWell network of the 4 partners, and also with outside trusted partners we have for services that we don't offer, it really is a universe and can meet people where they are. So everything from social and cultural, from the older adult who's completely mentally sharp, physically active, all the way to someone who may be entering hospice care. So I'm going to go through all of these really quickly in the interest of time. And I'm going to repeat myself, which is, don't feel like you have to write all this down or memorize all this. That's what we're here for. Is, I think you'll be able to access this recording and possibly the slides afterwards in any case, but please give us a call. So we have AgeWell Atlanta Neighborhoods. That is what I would call an extension of AgeWell. It used to be called NORCS for any of you on these calls on this call who knew what that was. But AgeWell Atlanta Neighborhoods provides opportunities for members across Atlanta to have educational opportunities, health and wellness, all of those things, because we get calls from people saying, my mom and dad are moving here. They don't know anybody. Well, guess what? We can get them connected to some of the virtual programs that are mostly no charge, and they can make friends before they even get here. So we found during the pandemic that people really loved the virtual programs in order to stay connected. And so even though things have opened up in person, we do still have some virtual offerings. Richard mentioned Jessica's support group hat that she wears. And I just want to put in a big plug here for support groups, because I know that it's not easy to join a support group, especially when you're busy. But I will promise you that if you call me and tell me you are a caregiver for your brother or your parents or your spouse or your partner, I'm going to suggest a support group to you, a caregiver support group, because it is really hard. It is really hard. And talking to other people who are in a similar boat that you are can be really helpful. There are other types of support groups like bereavement support groups, even a family estrangement support group. So if you call the concierges, we'll be on top of what the latest offerings are. Friendly visiting, I mentioned here, and community chaplaincy kind of together. They're just kind of in different settings. And in the interest of time, I'm not going to go into too much detail, except that we're really fortunate in the AgeWell network that this model of friendly visiting really has slimmed down in Georgia, and there aren't really very many programs that do this anymore. So I'm very happy that we are able to provide that companionship that so many older adults need. There's a whole list of memory supports, and what I would like you to take away from this slide is not a list, but just knowing that everyone in their aging journey who has cognitive impairment, and not everyone does, and not everyone will, but if they do, they may be at a different stage of their journey. They may have dementia, a wide range of different types of dementia, sometimes more than one dementia, types of dementia, but we get so many calls from people every day saying either I suspect a cognitive impairment or there is a cognitive impairment. So when you talk about getting from no to yes, what happens when that person is not able to get to yes, not because they're stubborn, and maybe they were stubborn before also, but what if there's some dementia at play? So we can talk to you, and we would only offer the services based on that level that you share with us. So again, meeting you where you are. Transportation, I could talk, well, I do have a whole other presentation about it, so we won't do that today. But I really want to emphasize that when people have to stop driving temporarily or permanently, that can be a real loss of independence. And I really encourage people to explore transportation options if that is going to be a challenge. I always say, you always hear this expression, take away the keys, which I absolutely hate that expression for a lot of reasons, but you can't do that without then saying, and how are we going to keep you independent without asking friends and relying upon your adult children? So just know that our concierges are trained on the latest and greatest of transportation, which can vary by county. Before we go on to the next slide, I do just want to emphasize that JF&CS has this great partnership with an agency, with a program, sorry, called On the Go, out of a sister Jewish agency in San Diego. And it uses the Lyft platform, but if anybody in the audience is thinking, no, I wish my dad would use Lyft, but he hates apps, or my mom is just not tech savvy, or, you know, my brother is at the beginning stages of dementia and he can still take Lyft, but he gets a little mixed up. Well, guess what? Once people are registered, they can actually call. They call the old-fashioned way, which I love, to schedule their rides. And secondly, those rides are monitored by staff at that agency, which can provide a lot of reassurance for caregivers, who, especially living in other states, to know that their parent is safe instead of just getting in the wrong Lyft, which is always the fear. This could also be a presentation in and of itself, but I implore all of you, if you have not had the pleasure of having this experience, to familiarize yourself with these terms and services before there is a hospitalization or some sort of crisis. Because the hardest calls that we get are when someone calls because their loved one is in the hospital and the hospital is sending them home. And they say, well, they're sending them home with home health. Okay. Home health is paid for by Medicare. It is short-term. It is skilled only. And what are you going to do about the bathing and the dressing? And in fact, we have someone we're helping right now, and her husband's coming home and his care needs sound very, very high. So we are encouraging her to try to hire a private duty home care agency. They charge by the hour, they're licensed and bonded. It is not cheap. But again, if you want to help your loved ones stay at home, that is the route you're going to go. And so many people don't understand that, and then they get someone home and the home health just isn't sufficient. Hospice is another service provided in the home, similar in that it's covered by Medicare if you meet the criteria. But like Richard said, all of these webinars, and I'm thinking some of you may be repeat attendees. If you have not watched the Weinstein conversation webinar that tells the difference between hospice and palliative care, you really want to do that, because I'm not even going to touch upon it here because they do such a great job of it. Home, I keep mentioning home. Research, years of research. That's what people want, is to be able to stay in their home. For dignity purposes, wherever someone is residing when we are helping them, that is their home, whether that is a house, whether that is an apartment, whether that is a nursing home. But if you take one thing away today from this presentation, from my portion, I would like everyone to know that a nursing home is not an inevitability. And I cannot tell you over the years how many caregivers I have call me say, I am struggling. I have my own family. I've got kids and after school programs, but my mom, I'm afraid she's going to set the house on fire because she has dementia, but she won't move to an assisted living. And she made me promise not to put her in a nursing home. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that. So-and-so made me promise never to put them in a nursing home. And one thing I want to say to reassure all of you is that there are many people who can age perfectly, safely in an assisted living, not a nursing home. And people don't always understand the difference. And I think a lot of the calls that we get at AgeWell are people trying to understand the difference. What is a nursing home? What is an assisted living? Who pays for it? And that is where we get to the heart of this presentation. Geriatric care management. I'd be curious later to ask how many people have heard of this term. Most people have not. I only know it because I work in the aging field, but I call it the best thing since sliced bread. I really feel that strongly about it. A geriatric care manager, and we have the pleasure of having a rock star one with us tonight, who's going to speak in just a moment. But we don't get people calling us asking for a geriatric care manager. Sometimes we do if they've done their research or one has been recommended. What they say instead is, can you send a social worker out to check on my mom? I'm worried about my brother. Can you, he's Jewish, I'm Jewish, you're a Jewish agency. Is there someone who can volunteer to go check on my brother? So they're usually saying social worker or just someone in general. And so we have a great opportunity at AgeWell to educate people about what a geriatric care manager can do for them. It is not covered by Medicare, so there are fees involved, but you can use them as little or as much as you want. So in general, when you call us as a concierge, where we kind of have to stop is that we don't go out in person. We don't ever meet you face to face, rarely. So the only person who can go out and actually assess and make recommendations would be a geriatric care manager. Their goal is to create something called a comprehensive care plan, which Jessica is going to talk about, but that's pretty much the heart of the initial service. And then some people hire a geriatric care manager just to help the family develop that care plan, but some of them continue and pay them an hourly rate for things like medical accompaniment. And I'm going to end with a story, which is that my mom lived in Florida and I lived here in Atlanta, and it was very, very challenging. We were very close. It was very challenging to be apart from her. And if you want to talk about stubborn, look it up in the dictionary. There's a picture of my mom. And she did not have dementia, but she would go to the doctor there in Florida when she was having some health issues. And I would call her like I did every day. And I would say, Mom, what did the doctor say? And she would go, again, not dementia. Well, Mom, that was just an hour ago. Why? I don't really know. I don't think she even absorbed some of what the doctor was saying. And then she would tell me the name of some procedure and I would look it up and I would be like, I am sure your doctor did not say that. So a geriatric care manager, they are not medical professionals, but they speak that same language and they can accompany your loved one to a medical appointment, help them advocate for themselves while they are there, and report back to you. So I covered a lot. I covered a lot in my presentation, but please give us a call. At the end of the day, we're going to ask you, what does your parent want? What does the person you are calling about want? Because they have such a strong voice in this process.
Thank you, Jennifer. So Jennifer covered a whole lot of options that are out there, you know, factors that you can plug into based on what the need is. There was a question about whether there's a fee for AgeWell. I know that if you refer a service, a geriatric care manager, there can be a fee for that, for the person's time. But for just making the call and getting advice, is there a fee for that?
I was hoping someone was going to ask that. No, it is not. We are funded completely by donations and through the Jewish Federation. So as of right now, you can call and talk to us during business hours, Monday through Friday, and at no cost.
Okay. And the anonymous person that asked the other question, I'm going to get back to her after Jessica's had a chance to speak, because Jessica is going to talk about brass tacks at this point, how to get your parent to accept help when they say they don't want it. And she's going to detail case studies, something interesting out there.
Thank you so much, Richard and Jennifer. I thought that the best way for me to just really explain what it is that geriatric care managers do is to really present an example of a type of case that I get, usually somebody who calls into AgeWell, as Jennifer's encouraging all of you to do. I will then get that warm handoff from Jennifer, and it will give me some basics about a situation that then I get involved with. So here's a typical type of thing I'll get involved with. An adult child in Florida will call AgeWell because they're concerned that their parents, who live alone in a home that's not handicapped accessible in Toco Hills, their mother has some type of memory situation going on. The father recently fell, he broke his hip, he was hospitalized, and now he's in rehab at the Jewish home, but he's going to be discharged later in the month. And they need to know how to prepare for his return home, as well as getting more support for their mom's memory problems. So here's how I handle that case. I first have to go out and visit the home, and I have to meet with the mom who has these memory issues. And in that initial meeting with her, I might talk with her and share with her, just educating her about memory support services. I'll ask questions that will give me a better idea of what's going on with her, like how does she take her medication? I'll have her show me where her medications are. Sometimes just the way they're presented tells me a whole lot about whether they're taking them properly. I'll ask her, while her husband's been at the Jewish home, how is she visiting him? Is she getting rides there, or is she driving herself? And then I'm going to really walk around the house, because I'm thinking about this man who broke his hip, who's still rehabbing, and I'm looking for how accessible this home is, especially if he's going to come home with a wheelchair or a walker. So I'm taking account of all of that. The next thing I have to do is really go visit the father at the rehab to get a picture of who he is. And oftentimes I will find a very, very resistant, strong, independent person that's at that rehab who says to me, I don't need anything. And I'll say, well, I was at your house and I see that you're, using a walker now, and there's a bunch of steps to get to your bathroom. So I think if we're going to have you come home, certain things are going to have to be in place, or you can't come home. And that's the tough love that sometimes an outside professional can provide in a very different way than an adult child, because I'm sort of this is my expertise. This is what I see all the time. And I'll just put it in those terms. If you want to go home, here's what we have to do. And I use the motivation of him likely wanting to get out of there, because very few people like to stay in rehab situations. So I will use that motivation to get him to agree to at least getting in place some of the things in his home. So another situation I want to explain after all of this, I will write up a whole summary of my visit with the mom, the visit with the dad, what I found in the home, and I'll give a whole report to the family and the parents with recommendations and how to support the father when he returns, but also memory support services for the mom, transportation support services. I will likely recommend that an occupational therapist go out to the home and prepare the home and make recommendations for all kinds of medical equipment and things that can be installed prior to him, returning home. But what's interesting is even after I do all of that, things sometimes change and life happens. And so even with a comprehensive plan, I will sometimes get a call back from the family that things have changed. Their dad caught COVID right before he was supposed to be discharged, and he had to be back in the hospital. And when he got back to the hospital, he really went downhill fast. He contracted pneumonia. He had to go on a ventilator. And now they're saying, that plan that you gave us, it's not going to work because he's terminal. And now it's a whole different situation. So then I'm going back and revisiting that, trying to figure out, okay, if he's going to be discharged from the hospital and this is the end of his life, I'm going to try to maybe recommend a program like Weinstein, put in place a hospital bed, make him comfortable with pain medication, just whatever support is needed at that stage. But I'm working all the time back and forth with the family, with the wife. I'm providing the support and recommendations as things are happening. So this type of case is very common, but it's unfortunate because this is the type of case that the adult children waited until there was a major, major problem, which was their dad's fall, his broken hip, his hospitalization, before they called for help. If you think about it, if they had called, 2 months earlier before this fall and said, you know what, I'm just worried about my parents living alone in a home in Toco Hills that isn't accessible. They're getting old. Can you go out and talk to them about what they could do to make their home safer? If I had that opportunity, I could have gone out and probably prevented the fall, because I could have recommended things maybe in the shower, maybe, steps with ramps, things like that. And I could have been proactive to prevent this crisis from happening. And especially with people who have resistant parents, meaning their parents are super independent, they don't need any help, they are fine. When you go in proactively, when there isn't a crisis, that's actually the best time, because there are options. When you have the luxury of time and you have the luxury to talk about different options, that's the best case scenario, because it's always important for the older person, who is the main person, by the way, in this situation. I know the adult children all mean well and family members all want the best, but it comes down to that person has to buy into the recommendations that I'm making. And if I can give them the power to give decision-making to them, meaning if there's 3 options and I can tell them, okay, you don't have to do all 3 things, but pick one, they're more likely to say yes when it's presented as options. And I have to remind people that when you are hospitalized, there are no options. The hospital dictates everything about your life, what you're eating, where you're going after the hospital. You don't get to make decisions. So sometimes for the more resistant and fiercely independent people, going in early and explaining, you have a choice. You can decide to do this or you can decide to do that, but all those decisions are all good things and all things that are going to help you stay in your home safely for as long as possible, if that is what they need. So that's really a strategy I use a lot with adult children, is how to present things in a certain way and presenting options. The other point I will mention, though, is I can tell an adult child to say these words to their parents, present it as, what would you like to try? And they will come back and say, well, my mom said, no, I'm not trying anything. And I'll say, okay, well, let me maybe have a separate conversation with her. And you would not believe that I could say the exact same words as an adult child, and the parent will hear it differently from me, because I am not the adult child. I don't care if you're 55 years old, your mom is still seeing you as a 5-year-old. And it is really difficult, that role reversal of this little child telling me what to do. They can't sometimes hear it. And so sometimes you just need to get somebody outside your family to handle that conversation. And it's literally the same words, but it comes out differently and it's heard differently and received differently when it's not from a family member. So that's sometimes also what I help navigate. And the other piece that comes up a lot in families are siblings and other family members that everyone has an opinion. And they all mean well. And I think it's wonderful when people are dedicated to helping their loved ones. However, Sometimes people butt heads. There's a lot of family dynamics that are not good at play. And so sometimes you just need a neutral party to be a mediator and to come up first with just a strategy and a plan for what everybody like agrees on for their parents, and then have that person like me, the mediator, go and then present that to the parents separately. But getting all the family on board on one page is also really, really important. And it really can't be done within a family sometimes. Sometimes you just need a neutral person. I just come in cold and I say, all right, everybody tell me what you each think. And you'd be surprised actually what people share when there's somebody else in the room, right? And I can do these things, by the way, not necessarily in person. I do a lot of Zoom mediation sessions where I have people out of the country even on Zoom. And when I'm in the middle and I'm just trying to understand what's going on, people will share things with me, even though they're in front of their siblings and other relatives that they may have never said before. And so that becomes very helpful too. The final thing I'll say, and then I'll let people ask questions and also Richard to ask me questions, is there's legal pieces to this as well. I don't know if a lot of you are familiar with the terms of power of attorneys, but there are legal financial power of attorneys where you have a legal ability to do payments on behalf of your parents. There's also a healthcare power of attorney or healthcare proxy where you can be appointed to make medical decisions. It's really important to have those kinds of conversations with your parents as well. The more you can pre-plan and have those kinds of documents in place, and for the family to know that those documents exist, and especially if they're named in a document, to know that they've agreed to that and they know where that document is. I help also with those types of things, and also even burial and funeral arrangements. I'm sometimes surprised. Sometimes I meet people as well into their 90s, and I'll just ask a question when I go out to their home. I'm just curious, do you have a plot, a burial plot? They're 95 years old. You would think they would say yes. And a lot of times they say no. And I have to explain to them what that means for their children or loved ones, because if they don't have a plan, then it's going to fall to their children, that burden of trying to come up with what is going to happen. So sometimes it's just explaining all the pieces, and it's a lot of education, and it's not a judgy thing. I'm not coming in to say, you must do this, you must do that. It's more, did you know that these are services that you could use? Did you know that there's a program that might be helpful? I've had a person tell me this was useful. Would you like to try it? So I guess that in a nutshell is the kind of work that I do, and I'm happy to take questions or whatever else you have to ask me.
Yes, thank you, Jennifer. Jessica, please put your questions in the box. And, a question came up about the sandwich generation. The adult children are squeezed by having work as well as kids, as well as parents to deal with. What's the easy answer on that? How can you convince a parent that the child has other responsibilities?
Well, I guess I become sort of a substitute child sometimes for people who are pulled in multiple directions. Jennifer shared before, it's not just that you're out of state. I have a lot of adult children that live locally that very much would want to go to every single medical appointment with their parent, but they can't because they have to be picking up carpool or they have to be at work. And so sometimes I become the substitute daughter, if you will, that will go and accompany them. So that's really, I would say I'm the answer. I would say bringing in another person, and especially, like I said, outside the family. So that way the person I'm advocating for the older adult. I know that there might be all kinds of opinions from the children, but I'm going to be asking the older adult, listen, I know your children are very worried about you, but tell me, what are the things that worry you? And what are the things that that they're concerned about this? Does that make you nervous that they're, worried that you're going to fall? Are you worried about falling? Are you concerned about how you're going to get places? So I'm there sort of on their side. I have some clients that utilize me to get their children off their case. That's actually how I stay involved is, yes, please come and tell my daughter that we met and that I'm okay. And so if that's how they want to utilize me, and I am an extra set of eyes, I'm able to go in and do check-ins. I'm considered like boots on the ground, especially for people who live not in this state, right? So at a distance, sometimes when I go to medical appointments, I'll FaceTime family members into the doctor appointment. So you can still be there, but it's helpful to have somebody physically able to see your parent and say, and I do it in real time. I will, as soon as I visit with someone, I will text or I will email or call a family member and say, I just saw your mom. Here's what happened. Today, as an example, I actually went, the children live out of state. Their mother recently, I got her to agree to one of those medical alert, I've fallen in, I can't get up systems. And I went over, it was charged, and I helped set it up for her, test it with her, make sure she understood it. I took pictures of it and sent it to her children to show them how the system works. And so those are the kinds of things, like when you are pulled in different directions, you need someone like me to come in between and substitute for you sometimes.
Thank you. Let's talk about the sibling issue again in a different way. Let's say there are siblings in town taking care of the parents, and there's siblings out of town not taking care of the parents. And the siblings out of town believe that the parent doesn't need any more help because the one in town can handle it. So how do you deal with that? How can you help?
So the only way I would say I can manage that, I mean, I first hear them out. I like to get background and what they each believe is going on. And that actually gives me sort of the basis to make a case to say, you know, I hear all of you, but for me to really make good recommendations, I'm going to need to see your parent and their living situation. So usually that conversation ends in, will you all agree to allow me to go in and give my opinion on what's going on? And then sometimes the things that I observe are things that even the children who are here, who have gone themselves, they may not know because their parents have shared some things with me. And again, when I go in, this is a confidential thing between me and their parent, that I have to get permission from their parent to share the report that I'm going to give, unless there's a cognitive issue, of course. And unless there's a legal document that says that so-and-so has, you know, sometimes people have guardianships, as an example. So they have every legal right over their parents' every decision. But when you don't have those legal things, I will go in as the person who's advocating for the parent, get a lot of information back. And then I like to bring all the family members back with their parents, actually, either on a Zoom call, or if everybody's in town, we can do it in person. And I go over the report that I provide to them. And the biggest part of that is really opening their eyes to some of the things they didn't even know were happening, especially when it comes to medication. Sometimes, you know, people can present themselves much better than what is really happening. And like I said, I pick up on small things like, you know, show me, how did you get these medications? Did you go to the store to get them? Did you drive there? How many times a day do you take this? Do you have a pill box? I ask all these questions. And so things get exposed that some adult children don't even know to ask or to look for. So then I can share, not in a judgmental way, but to say, you know, it seems like we don't have a really reliable system for taking pills. And here's a bunch of options. There's technology options like dispensers that are connected to iPhones. There's simple pill boxes. There's also people who like to just call their parents and remind them to take their medicine. So there's all these different options. So we usually go through that together. And that helps, to your original question, when people have these differing points of view, it brings everybody back to the same page, because now I've consolidated the different priorities for the parents and their safety. And everybody pretty much agrees, okay, we want to prevent them from falling. We want to make sure they're taking medications they're supposed to be taking. We want to make sure that if they shouldn't be driving, they have transportation. I try to go after the things first and foremost that the older adult who is my client wants, but also things that you can't really argue with, right? Like if it's a life and death safety thing, it's hard for the older person to say, no, I don't need that. And if I can give a concrete example of why they're in danger, it's hard for them to fight those things. The medical alert button is one of the things that I go after first, because it's such an easy thing for an older person to accept. It's just this button that you wear. You're not even aware that it's on you, but it's a way to have instant security. They have these automatic fall detection systems now that have GPS. And so adult children can be notified if there's a fall. It automatically connects by GPS to the company if there's a fall. And so it gives peace of mind to everyone. I'll sometimes say to the older person, if you get this medical alert, you realize your daughter's not going to call you as much if she knows that you're wearing this. She's not going to be as worried because she knows that you can get help right away, and that she doesn't have to worry that you're going to try to reach her and she's in a meeting. So simple things like that, it's like getting a common ground is how I will handle that.
So I know we want to consult the geriatric care manager prior to a fall, but what are the factors that an adult child should be looking for in order to pick up the phone and call the geriatric care manager ahead of time to prevent the fall? I mean, is it an instability of walking? Is it a confusion? Is it a certain age that they're at?
I wouldn't say it's age, but the first two, yes. Age is a hard one because, like I said, I sometimes work with people who are 100 and doing very well. So I wouldn't use age, but anytime you see, a lot of times families really pick up the phone to call, I would say AgeWell after holidays, when they have just seen their parents and something is different. It could be a balance thing. It could be they're repeating themselves. They lost their keys. They go in their home and they look in the refrigerator and there's moldy food. The house, the bathroom, a lot of times when women or men have incontinence problems, right? They're having accidents, it smells. That's usually when we get the most, calls, is after they've seen a change of some type of situation that concerns them. Also, sometimes just on the phone, even if a child is out of town, they can pick up on strange, things that their parent is saying, or they had this conversation like a few minutes before and they're not, processing it. So the memory piece is a big one. I would say people really pick up on that first. I would say the physical stuff, you have to be hands-on, see them in their environment. And that's usually when people call. But again, some people are just really proactive and they just say, you know what, I just want to have a plan in place. I don't necessarily need all these services. So sometimes people just say, I just want an assessment of where I'm at right now, but services that I could possibly need in the future. I'm not necessarily going to call them today, but I just want to have this report. So sometimes it doesn't need to be something happened. It can just be, I just want this done. And so I'll know who to call if and when something happens to me that I need help with.
Okay. If someone wants their mom to move into assisted living for more oversight, but she refuses, is that an easy call to AgeWell? Can AgeWell interfere?
AgeWell will make their referrals, right, Jennifer? You could take that one.
I know, keep going. I'll chime in.
I'll say this. A lot of people have a misconception that if I move my parent to assisted living, everything's going to be better. They're not going to fall anymore. They're going to be well supported. It's not that they're not going to be well supported, but the person is going to fall even in assisted living sometimes. There's not somebody with them holding their hand 24/7, even in an assisted living, unless the family is hiring somebody 24/7 to be with them. So I see a lot of times this pattern of children specifically thinking, all right, they can't stay at home. We have to move them. And my answer to that is, have you asked your parent if they want to move? If they say yes, great. If they say no, I want to stay in my home, it's a whole other situation because we can put in place so much in the home before jumping to moving. At the same time, while things are being put in place at home, I will encourage people to tour retirement communities. Because here's the problem. You could want to go tomorrow, but they have long wait lists, like year-long wait lists or more. So even if you wanted to, you can't just go to, even if you have money, you can't just go to an assisted living. You have to kind of be in the running for it. So I tell people just to start touring at least 2 places to get an idea of what's out there and to get on a list, which sometimes has like a little bit of a down payment deposit, but it's refundable if you never move there. But I go with first what the person wants, because the last thing you need is you can't force somebody really who has their, cognitive abilities. You can't force them to move. And if you do force them to move, it's a nightmare for them. It's a nightmare for the community. You need to get buy-in from the beginning from the parent, or it's not going to go well. Sometimes people go really downhill in retirement communities if that's not what they wanted. They kind of give up and they just don't want to even get engaged. So you really have to be careful with how you, first of all, present things, but also that there's an option to stay at home. Sometimes with memory impairment, it gets more complicated if people are wandering and things like that. But for people who are physically frail, you can have 24 hours a day of somebody in your home. And it is costly, but assisted livings are also costly. So sometimes you have to weigh those two, but at least those are options and it's not you need to move.
Is there a geographic limit for you calling on people in the metro area, like for instance, Woodstock and Canton? Can you go there?
I speak to people on WhatsApp in Israel. So I can talk to people wherever they are, you know, with time differences, obviously we have to coordinate that a little bit better, but I have current clients with family. I have one client who has a daughter in Israel, a son in Atlanta, and a brother who's her power of attorney for her finances who lives in San Diego. So we coordinate phone calls sometimes or Zoom calls, or sometimes I'm just going in between them. And my favorite story to tell about that particular client is with the family dynamics piece. The power of attorney brother who lives in San Diego doesn't like his sister's daughter who lives in Israel. And he will tell me, you know, tell my sister's daughter she shouldn't text me. She could pick up the phone and call me from Israel. But these are the kinds of things I just become the messenger. And that way they don't have to have these fights, right? They share this stuff with me and it's kept with me. And then I can just relay the important information and get what needs to be done for the actual older adult.
And can I just step in and add too that JF&CS as one of our partners, it's not just Jessica. There are other geriatric care managers on staff and a manager of those geriatric care managers who is always going to have that initial call with someone and match them with a geriatric care manager based upon partially their geography. And, you know, because so for example, if what you were asking, Richard, was like, that was a great example Jessica gave, but what about the individual who is her client? Like, would she be able to go and take them to a medical appointment, for example? So that is definitely factored in with such a small team of geriatric care managers. But as you learn, they really find a way to work around it. I think there are 4 now, Jessica, is that correct? 4 geriatric care managers plus a manager. So they're going to do their best to find someone who can meet that geographic need.
Yeah. And in terms of what the level of care that's needed is, assisted living communities may have immediate availability. So if that's what they need, that's possible. The nursing homes, that tends to have more of a waiting period.
It also requires certain criteria. You can't just move to a nursing home. So all of those things, sometimes I talk through these things with families. I'm actually not a placement expert. I do refer people to senior placement experts who this is their job, is to find the right retirement place for people. But I will get the family to the point of accepting the idea of it and touring. And then I do my warm handoff with, you know, different colleagues that I work with in that field. But getting, like you said, getting to yes is a process, and sometimes it's slow. I wish it was like, I just walk in and they say yes to everything. That's never how it works. But I start with just trying to show them that I'm on their side. Like, I want to make it whatever it is that they want to see happen for themselves. I'm on board as long as they're safe and they can, you know, do it in a way that their children feel good about it. They feel good about themselves. I'm all for it. So I try to first develop just a trust relationship with the older person. And I try to offer like these things that are not as big a deal, like a necklace that they wear. And I always present it as, let's just try it. If you hate it and you don't want to do it anymore, you don't have to do it anymore. And then as I get them to see, let's say they try one thing and they like that one thing, they're more likely to say, okay, I'll try that other thing you said. But I do one little step at a time. It's very hard, especially when you're older. And I think we all know, like, we get set in our ways, and the older you are, the more set you are in how you do things. And so somebody coming in and changing all of that, it just doesn't happen. It's not human nature to want to change. So it's incremental little baby steps of getting them to agree to small things that lead to bigger things. But all the while, sometimes I even have to take a stand, not against the children, but in favor of their parents' wishes that may not be the same as what their children have in mind. But as long as I can show that it's safe and we can do it in a way that, you know, covers all the bases, and I have to kind of convince everybody, but definitely the older person has to buy in. That's first and foremost. And that's how I approach things.
So everybody's looking for that easy button, you know, when they're dealing with this. And is it just a phone call to AgeWell and, hey, let's get a geriatric care manager out to talk with us and understand what our needs are and then make recommendations? Is that the easiest it's going to be?
That would be the start. That's definitely the start. And again, sometimes people, you know, they want this for their parent, but then their parent is like, no. And I try very hard. Sometimes it will just be an initial phone call that I have with their parent to try to get the parent to agree to see me, because sometimes they have in their mind something different than what I am. And sometimes it just takes me explaining over the phone, I'm not coming to make you move. I'm not coming to, like, you know, critique how you clean your home. I'm just coming to teach you about things that I know are available through Jewish Family and Career Services and other services in your area. Will you let me just come and share with you that information? If I can get in the door, that's the hardest part. So the phone call to AgeWell will get to someone like me. Then I will likely have an initial call with probably a family member who wants this more than the parent, come up with a way to sell me, if you will, to their parent to actually accept a phone call from me. The next step is me getting on the phone with them and getting them to agree to come to their home. And once I come to their home and I can really get to know them and show them, like, I'm on your side. I don't just, by the way, observe the home and all these needs that they have. I ask very personal questions about who they are. Like, what did you do for a living? And how long were you married? And I really learn about them. And a lot of older people, you know, they want to talk about these things. They feel like they're, you know, ignored. People don't care about them anymore. And I'm this person that I'm interested. I want to know, what did you do when you were younger? And I want to, because part of it is, I want to connect them with the things that they love. And they may not realize that just because they're older, they can still do a lot of those things. I met one man who's 97. He's an avid music person. And I learned that from walking around his home, and he has a collection of guitars, like a Gibson, and banjos, a piano in the basement. And so one of the things I was able to recommend to him, even though he has arthritic fingers now, he can't play his banjo, there's a senior center that he goes to for physical therapy. And I looked up their classes, and there's all these music programs that he's not tapping into. And I said, you know, you love music. Why don't you consider one of the days that you're there for physical therapy, staying for like a music program? So it's partly exposing them to things that they enjoy, that they can still tap into. And again, if they like what I have to offer, then they're more likely to listen to the things that maybe they're a little bit more on the fence about, because I gave them something that they liked and that they wanted, and they heard what they had to say. That's very validating. A lot of times older people feel like their children think that they can't do things anymore. And on some level, they can't do it the way they used to do it, but they can do it differently. And that's part of what I have to teach adult children is, we don't want to take away people's ability to do things. We're just trying to adapt their safety. So if somebody still wants to cook and you don't want them bending and lifting things, okay, we'll figure out a way for them to do it in a safer way, but we don't want them not cooking if they're still wanting to cook, and we can do it in a safe way.
If part of your plan is to recommend implementation of various things in their home, what if they can't afford it? I mean, how do you deal with that?
So I work typically with people who have the ability to afford things. However, Jewish Family and Career Services has a whole bunch of other programs for people with fixed incomes and lower incomes, where we have actual grants, but it is an income-based thing. So if I come to find in my assessment, actually, that somebody has lower income, also Holocaust survivors, which isn't necessarily an income-based thing, but if you are a Holocaust survivor, we have an entire Holocaust survivor department, and those people are entitled to benefits from Germany and all kinds of other programs. So a lot of what I'm doing is piecing together everything that they could potentially qualify for, and then I'm referring as well back to Jewish Family and Career Services, sometimes depending what county they live in. If they live in Fulton County has special benefits. DeKalb County has its own benefits, Cobb County. So I'm the person that kind of gets the whole picture, and I'm trying to direct them and steer them to the places that they can get things either cheap or free if they qualify, or if they have the means, then I will give them, you know, the agencies that are the hourly and the more expensive things, but I'm trying to tailor it based on where they are financially, and what they need.
And I would say ditto for AgeWell, even going back to if someone's not working with a geriatric care manager. I don't know what percent of people call us don't have the financial resources. Aging is expensive. So I try to keep our concierges up on the latest and greatest of programs through grants. I mean, let's be honest, no temporary program is ever going to pay for 24/7 care in the home. It just doesn't exist. But sometimes people have long-term care insurance. We can ask about that. And honestly, we refer a lot of people over to the Area Agency on Aging because they might be eligible for a Medicaid waiver program, which is not just for people who are Medicaid eligible. And we can educate you about that and send you a flyer and get you over to the Area Agency on Aging. So I just want to say it's not even just what's within JF&CS or Jewish Home Life. It's, you know, we kind of know the range of services outside too for people who can't afford it.
Well, you ladies have answered a lot of great questions, and we're running short on time. But I think to summarize what's been said, I mean, there is no easy button, but there is one call to AgeWell that will refer you, if you have an issue, to a myriad of opportunities and myriad of services, and could include a call to a person like Jessica, who will, in addition to that, go into your home and assess and figure out what's going to be the best next step in terms of geriatric care plan, et cetera. So I think we've presented a full answer, but I think there's a lot of people out there that are still, you know, looking for that easy answer. So
I wish there was a magic pill. I just want to say one last thing. For those that are dealing with parents that are really feisty, I call them feisty, and really, really strong-willed, I tell people you don't get to be 85, 90 years old by being like this passive, walk all over me type person. I tell people all the time, those people die young. The ones that live to be 90, 100 years old, those are the tough survivors. And you don't want to take that fight away from them. That's actually how they got to be the age they are. So you have to honor that on some level. It is very difficult. It's very easy to say that, because then living that, you know, and dealing with somebody like who is really difficult, not easy, but you have to step back and say, wow, like the day that they stop fighting, you have to be really worried about that day. Then you know that something's wrong, because the ones that are the fiercest, they live the longest. And sometimes you just have to present things. I also tell people, and this is going to sound a little awkward, but those who have had toddlers on this call, when a toddler is having tantrums and saying no to everything, it's a very similar situation to an older person who is doing the same thing, saying no to everything. It's just they're at opposite ends of life, right? So the toddler is gaining independence. The older person's losing independence. And in both scenarios, sometimes, especially with an older person who is really physically disabled and totally dependent on someone, all they have left is to say no. Like in terms of just feeling like they have a say, that's all they have left. So with toddlers, you always try to give them like three options of things all three things you want, but then you tell you know, do you want the pink shirt, the green shirt, or the red shirt, you know? And then it doesn't matter which shirt, like as long as they pick a shirt. So take the same strategy with your parents, like give them options. Don't tell them what they need to do, because they're just going to resist that. Similar to teenagers who are going to do the exact opposite of what you tell them. Make them feel like they're the decision maker, but all the things they're choosing between are things that you secretly want to happen. But they don't need to know that. They need to know that they're just being in charge. They need to feel that power, especially as an adult. It's different than a kid who never had the power to begin with. Losing power over yourself is really hard. And so you need to step back and understand that that's really what they're going through. And that's why they're taking out what they're taking out on you. Has nothing to do with you. It's their loss of their independence. And so just trying to be sensitive to that, even though it's difficult in the moment when they're yelling at you, just realize it's—
And join a caregiver support group. I see
Yes.
someone asked that question in the chat. I mentioned other types of support group like bereavement. I'm not sure which one the person who asked was asking about. Family estrangement. Those are usually done in series, not always by JF&CS, sometimes by the Alzheimer's Association, but we stay on top of all of that. And that is, again, no yes button, but you can really talk to a lot of other people. And what did you try with your mom? And what are you trying? And how's that working? And just really that value of understanding that you're not alone in this scenario.
Okay, well, thank you so much again. Thank you, Jessica and Jennifer. If you have additional questions, look at that slide right there. There's a phone number and a website for you to go to. But thank you very much. We'll have another one in November, another conversations webinar. But if a question about this subject comes up, send it to that phone number. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.